Y/N. We've all had those days, haven't we? Where everything feels like it's going wrong. For our Y/N, today is that day, amplified by 100. And it all centers on one man, the enigmatic, demanding, and devastatingly handsome Mr. Jeon Jungkook. The rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Jeon Corp. Mimicking the storm raging in my heart, I clutched the folder of documents to my chest like a shield, my knuckles white. In 10 minutes, I had to present the quarterly marketing report to the board. And to him, Mr. Jeon, just the thought of his intense, dark eyes scrutinizing my every word made my palms sweat. Jeon Jungkook wasn't just my boss. He was a force of nature. At 28, he had built a multi-billion won empire from the ground up. He was brilliant, ruthless in business, and possessed a quiet intensity that could make seasoned executives stammer. To me, he was also the man I'd secretly been in love with for the past 2 years. It was a foolish, hopeless crush. He barely knew I existed outside of my efficiency. As his marketing assistant, I was just Y/N, the quiet one who always had his coffee ready and his schedules perfectly managed. Y/N. You're up in 5, Jin, the head of PR and the office's resident mom said gently, peeking into the break room. Kim Seok-jin, or Jin, as he insisted we call him, was a surprising beacon of warmth in the cold, sterile environment of Jeon Corp. He was also one of Mr. Jeon's closest friends. Y/N. I know, Jin. I'm just nervous, Jin. Don't be. You know this material better than anyone. Just ignore Jungkook's grumpy face. He was up all night finalizing the merger deal. He's basically running on caffeine and sheer willpower right now. I offered him a weak smile that was supposed to make me feel better. The thought of a sleep-deprived, even more irritable Jungkook was terrifying. Taking a deep breath, I walked into the conference room. It was filled with the company's top brass, but my eyes went straight to the head of the table. Jungkook was leaning back in his leather chair, scrolling through his tablet. He was dressed in an impeccably tailored black suit that stretched across his broad shoulders. A lock of his dark hair fell over his forehead, and he impatiently brushed it away. My heart did a little traitorous flip. For the next 20 minutes, I presented. My voice was steady, even if my hands trembled slightly. I pointed to charts, explained strategies, and answered questions from the other directors. Throughout it all, Jungkook was silent, his gaze fixed on me. It was unnerving. I couldn't tell if he was impressed or planning my execution. Just as I was wrapping up, the door opened, and his PA announced the arrival of Mr. Choi, a crucial client from a major retail chain. Jungkook finally looked away from me, a professional smile gracing his lips as he stood to greet the older man. JK. Mr. Choi, welcome. Thank you for joining us on such short notice. The meeting reconvened, now with a focus on the collaboration with Mr. Choi's company. I was asked to stay to provide marketing insights. As the discussion progressed, Mr. Choi, a man in his 50s, with a slick smile and overly familiar hands, took the seat next to me at first. It was just a pat on the shoulder. I shifted away slightly. Then, as I was explaining a demographic chart, I felt his hand on my lower back, guiding me towards the screen. It was inappropriate, but I tried to brush it off, not wanting to cause a scene. I moved to the other side of the table, pretending to point something out on the main monitor. The climax came when we were all standing, looking over the final proposal. Mr. Choi came to stand far too close behind me as Jungkook was speaking about profit margins. I felt Mr. Choi's hand slide down from my back, over my hip, giving a subtle but unmistakable squeeze. I flinched violently, stumbling forward a step. My elbow knocked over a glass of water, sending it crashing to the floor and shattering. The room fell into a stunned silence. All eyes were on me. Mr. Choi immediately put on a mask of concern. Mr. Choi. Goodness, Miss Y/N, are you all right? You seem very jumpy today. My face was burning with a mixture of humiliation and rage. I opened my mouth to speak, to tell him exactly why I had jumped, but my words got stuck in my throat. I was just so shocked. And then Jungkook spoke. His voice was like ice, cutting through the tense silence. His eyes, which had been warm and engaged with Mr. Choi, were now cold shards of obsidian, fixed directly on me. JK. Y/N, that was extremely unprofessional. Apologize to Mr. Choi for your behavior and for disrupting this meeting. Tears pricked the back of my eyes. He didn't know. He hadn't seen. He only saw me, the clumsy assistant, causing a scene in front of his most important client. The man I loved was looking at me with pure disappointment. Y/N. I couldn't do it. I couldn't apologize for reacting to that man's violation without another word. I turned and fled the conference room. The sound of shattering glass and Jungkook's scolding voice echoing in my ears. /N. Oh, the pain, the misunderstanding. My heart breaks for Y/N to be scolded by the person you admire most when you're the one who's been wronged. It's a special kind of agony. But remember, dear reader, the darkest hour is just before the dawn, or in this case, just before a very protective Jungkook finds out the truth. /N. Running away from your problems never really solves them. But in that moment, it feels like the only option. For Y/N, the sanctuary is the office rooftop, a place she often escaped to for a moment of peace. But peace is the last thing she's about to find. I didn't stop until I reached the rooftop. The cold wind whipping my hair and cooling my feverish skin, I leaned against the railing, looking out at the Seoul skyline blurred by rain and tears. The humiliation was a physical weight on my chest. He thought so little of me, all my hard work, my dedication, my silent love. It all meant nothing. In his eyes, I was just an employee who couldn't handle the pressure. I heard the heavy metal door creak open behind me. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. The The air itself seemed to shift, charged with his presence. JK. Y/N. His voice was quieter now, but still held an edge. I wiped my tears furiously with the back of my hand, refusing to let him see me cry. Y/N. I suppose you're here to fire me, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Still facing the city, he didn't answer immediately. I heard his footsteps approach until he was standing beside me, his own hands gripping the railing. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see his profile, sharp and defined against the gray sky. JK. I expect an explanation. That was a multi-million-dollar deal you just potentially jeopardized. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. Y/N. Of course. The deal, that's all that matters, isn't it? I finally turned to look at him. The anger and hurt I'd bottled up for 2 years came bubbling to the surface. Y/N. You didn't even ask what happened. You just assumed I was being unprofessional. You saw me flinch. You saw me knock over the glass, and you immediately took his side. His brow furrowed. He looked confused and maybe a little irritated by my tone. JK. What are you talking about? Mr. Choi is a respected businessman. What could he have possibly done to warrant that kind of reaction? The dam broke. Y/N. Respected. My voice trembled. A respected businessman doesn't put his hand on his employee's lower back. He doesn't stand so close you can feel his breath on your neck. And he certainly doesn't. I took a shaky breath, the memory making me feel sick. He certainly doesn't grab your hip and squeeze it when no one is looking. The change in Jungkook's demeanor was instantaneous and profound. His confusion vanished, replaced by a stillness that was more frightening than any outburst. His knuckles, where they gripped the railing, turned white. His jaw tightened, and his eyes, which had been merely cold, now held a dark, dangerous storm. JK. He did what? His voice was low, barely a whisper, but it carried more threat than a shout. Y/N. You heard me. He touched me, inappropriately. More than once during that meeting, I moved away each time. I tried to avoid it without causing a scene. But when he grabbed me, I couldn't just stand there and take it. I watched as the truth settled over him. I saw the moment. His memory replayed the scene in the conference room, viewing it through this new, horrifying lens. He saw my flinch not as clumsiness, but as a reaction to violation. He saw my stumble not as awkwardness, but as an attempt to escape. And he saw his own words, his cold demand for an apology for what they were. A profound failure to protect someone he was responsible for. The anger in his eyes wasn't directed at me anymore. It was a pure, blazing fury for what had been done to me. And beneath the anger, something else flickered, a deep, gut-wrenching regret. JK. Y/N. He began, his voice rough. I didn't see. I didn't know. Y/N. You didn't bother to look, I whispered, the fight draining out of me, leaving only exhaustion and heartache. You just saw me, your quiet, insignificant assistant, making a mess of your important meeting. I turned to leave, unable to bear the intensity of his gaze. any longer, JK. Wait, his hand shot out, not to grab me, but to gently circle my wrist. His touch was warm, a stark contrast to the cold metal of the railing. It was the first time he had ever touched me without a file or a coffee cup between us, JK. Don't go, not like this. I stopped, my back to him, my pulse hammering where his skin met mine, JK. You are not insignificant. His words were firm, leaving no room for argument. I slowly turned to face him. The storm in his eyes had softened into something more complex, more pain, JK. Look at me, Y/N. Reluctantly, I lifted my gaze to his, JK. I am so sorry I failed you. As your boss and as a man, my only job in that room was to ensure a productive and safe environment for my team. And I was so focused on the deal that I was blind to what was happening right in front of me. My reaction was unforgivable. He was apologizing. The great Jeon Jungkook was apologizing to me, and he meant it. I could see the genuine remorse etched on his face, Y/N. It's okay, I mumbled, though it wasn't. Not real, JK. No, he said, his grip on my wrist tightening just a fraction. It's not okay. Nothing about what he did is okay, and nothing about how I treated you is okay. He released my wrist, and I immediately missed the contact, JK. Go home. Y/N, take the rest of the day off. Paid. Don't argue, he said, seeing me open my mouth to protest. I need to go back in there and handle this. The look on his face as he said, handle this, sent a shiver down my spine. It was the same look he got right before a hostile corporate takeover, Y/N. What are you going to do? A slow, dangerous smile touched his lips, but it didn't reach his eyes, JK. I'm going to make it very, very clear that no one touches what's mine. And with that, he turned and walked back towards the door, leaving me alone on the rooftop, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. What's mine? Did he mean his employee? Or something more, A/N? The plot thickens. What's mine? Jeon Jungkook. You have no idea the hope those two words just ignited. But first, business, and something tells me Mr. Choi is about to have the worst business meeting of his life, A/N. While Y/N tries to process everything, Jungkook is setting things right. Let's peek into the lion's den, shall we? Sometimes, the most romantic thing a man can do is show his unwavering protectiveness. Jungkook walked back into the conference room with a calm that was entirely deceptive. The board members had dispersed, leaving only a nervous-looking Jin and a smug Mr. Choi, who was sipping a glass of whiskey, no doubt provided from Jungkook's private stock. Mr. Choi. Ah, Jungkook SSI. I hope you dealt with your emotional employee. These young girls, they can be so fragile these days. Jin, who had been briefed by a furious Jimin from the security team, who'd seen the rooftop cameras, looked like he wanted to pour the whiskey over Mr. Choi's head. Jungkook didn't sit down. He walked to the head of the table and placed his palms flat on the polished surface, leaning forward. The friendly CEO was gone. In his place was the predator who had earned the nickname, the Titan in the business world. JK, the deal is off, Choi. Mr. Choi choked on his drink. Mr. Choi. What? Jungkook SSI, be reasonable. Over one hysterical girl, JK. Her name, Jungkook's voice dropped to a deadly quiet, is Y/N, and she is one of the most valuable members of my team. More valuable, I assure you, than you will ever be to any company ever again. Mr. Choi's face began to turn purple. Mr. Choi, you can't be serious. This is business. My company, JK, will be receiving a formal notice of termination from our end, citing unethical conduct from its CEO. I will also be making calls to the heads of Lot, Shinsegae, and Hyundai department store. I'm quite close with them. I think they'll be very interested to hear about your hands-on negotiation tactics. The color drained from Mr. Choi's face. Jungkook was threatening to blacklist him from every major retailer in South Korea. Mr. Choi, you have no proof. It's her word against mine. Jungkook straightened up, a cold smile playing on his lips. He gestured to Jin, who tapped a few keys on his laptop. The large screen on the wall lit up, showing multiple camera angles from the conference room. One of them, a discreet wide-angle lens, clearly showed Mr. Choi's hand on Y/N's lower back. Then his quick, furtive movement towards her hip just before she flinched and knocked over the glass. Jin had worked fast. JK, as you can see, we have a zero-tolerance policy for harassment at Jeon Corp Security. We'll see you out. And Mr. Choi, Jungkook's eyes narrowed. If you ever come near Y/N or any of my employees again, I will not be so civil. Two large security guards, led by a grim-faced Park Jimin, head of security, and Jungkook's other best friend, entered the room. Jimin's friendly, smiling face was set in hard lines. Jimin, Mr. Choi, this way, please. As a sputtering Mr. Choi was escorted out, Jin let out a low whistle. Jin. Well, that was satisfyingly dramatic. You just torched a 10 billion won deal, Kook. JK, she's worth 100 of those deals, Jungkook said, his voice low, as he stared at the now blank screen where the evidence had played out. Jin raised an eyebrow, a knowing smile spreading across his face. Jin, is she now? You know, for the past 2 years, you've only ever referred to her as my assistant, or Y/N from marketing. Suddenly, she's worth 100 deals. Jungkook ran a hand through his hair, the adrenaline starting to fade, replaced by a gnawing worry. JK, I was a fool, Hyung. I didn't see what was happening right under my nose. And I made her feel small. I saw the look in her eyes. She was so hurt. Jimin re-entered the room, his usual cheerful demeanor returning. Jimin, the trash has been taken out. I also took the liberty of having his name added to the blacklist of every building we own a stake in. He won't be able to get a reservation at a decent restaurant in Gangnam for the next decade. He then looked at Jungkook, his head tilted. So the little assistant, the one you're always not staring at during meetings, Jungkook shot him a glare. But there was no heat in it, Jin. He's got it bad, Jimina. He just went full, scorched earth for her. I haven't seen him like this since. Well, ever, JK. It's not like that, Jungkook muttered, though his protest was weak, Jimin. Sure, it's not. That's why you look like you'd rather fight a bear than face the fact that you might have feelings for your employee. JK, what should I do? The question slipped out, surprising even him. He was Jeon Jungkook. He didn't ask for advice on personal matters. Jin's face softened. Well, first, you make sure she's okay, not as her boss, but as a man who cares about her. And then, you tell her the truth. Jungkook nodded slowly, a plan forming in his mind. The business part was handled. Now, it was time for the personal reckoning A/N. Yes, the protectiveness. The scorched earth policy. Seeing Jungkook stand up for Y/and so fiercely is everything. But now comes the hard part, mending her broken heart. And his own realizations. Oh, this is getting good, A/N. The rest of the day passed in a blur for Y/, and she went home, changed into soft pajamas, and curled up on her couch, replaying the events on the rooftop over and over. His apology, the fire in his eyes, the words, "What's mine?" It was all so confusing. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of dread. I had to go back to work. I had to face him. What would it be like? Awkward? Formal? Would he pretend nothing happened? I dressed carefully in a simple navy blue dress, wanting to project an image of professionalism and composure I certainly didn't feel. The office was quiet when I arrived. Much quieter than usual. My desk, which was right outside Jungkook's office, felt like a stage. On it sat a small, elegant vase holding a single, perfect white lily. There was no card. My heart skipped a beat. Was it from him? It had to be. No one else would put something on my desk directly. I sat down, my eyes constantly flicking towards his closed office door. An hour passed, then 2. He usually arrived by 7 a.m. It was past 9:30 finally. The elevator dinged, and he stepped out. My breath caught. He wasn't in a suit. He was wearing dark jeans and a simple black long-sleeved shirt, the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing his tattoos. He looked approachable and devastatingly handsome. He walked straight towards my desk, his eyes not leaving mine. He stopped in front of me, his hands in his pockets. JK, good morning, Y/N. His voice was soft, tentative even Y/N. Good morning, Mr. Jeon. He flinched almost imperceptibly at the formal title JK. Did you rest okay, Y/N? Yes, thank you. An awkward silence descended upon us. He glanced at the lily on my desk, JK. Do you like it, Y/N? It's beautiful, thank you. I paused. What does it mean? He looked directly at me, his gaze intense and sincere. JK. It can mean a lot of things. Purity, renewal. He took a small step closer. But mostly, it means I'm sorry. My carefully constructed composure cracked a little Y/N. You already apologized. JK, not properly. A rooftop apology after making you cry doesn't count. He took a deep breath. Y/N, the deal with Choi is terminated. He will never set foot in this building, or any building associated with me again. I've made sure of it. My eyes widened. You ended the deal. Because of me, JK. Because what he did was wrong. And because I was wrong, I should have believed you without question. The weight I had been carrying since yesterday finally began to lift. He hadn't just apologized. He had taken action. He had chosen to believe me, to protect me, at a great financial cost. Y/N. Thank you, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. JK. Don't thank me. It was the bare minimum. He shifted his weight. I have no meetings today. I was wondering if you would have lunch with me. It wasn't a command from a boss. It was a question, a request. And it sent my heart into a wild frenzy. Y/N. Lunch, JK. Yes, as an apology lunch. There's a place I know, very private. We can talk. Properly. I should have said no. This was my boss. This was complicated. But the look in his eyes, hopeful, vulnerable, so different from the cold CEO I was used to, made it impossible. Y/N. I'd like that. A genuine, breathtaking smile spread across his face. It was a smile I had only ever seen in fleeting moments, usually directed at his friends. It transformed his entire face, making him look younger, softer. My heart did a somersault. JK. Good. I'll pick you up at your desk at noon. He gave me one last, long look before turning and walking into his office, closing the door softly behind him. I stared at the closed door, then at the white lily. Renewal. A new beginning. For the first time since the incident, a small, hopeful smile touched my lips. A/N. A lunch date. Well, an apology lunch. But we all know what it really is. The tension is shifting from painful to deliciously anticipatory, and Jungkook in casual clothes. We are not strong enough for this. A/N. The apology lunch is here. This is where walls come down, truths are spoken, and two hearts tentatively reach for each other at noon sharp. Jungkook emerged from his office. My mouth went dry. He had put on a black leather jacket over his shirt, and he looked more like a superstar than a CEO. He didn't say much as he led me down to the private parking garage, where his black Maybach was waiting. He opened the passenger door for me, his hand gently guiding me in. The gesture was so old-fashioned, so gentlemanly, it felt surreal. The restaurant was, as promised, incredibly private. A traditional hanok house with individual rooms overlooking a serene courtyard garden. We were seated on floor cushions, a low table between us. The atmosphere was intimate, a world away from the corporate glass of Jeon Jungkook. After we ordered, another awkward silence fell. He played with his chopsticks, seemingly gathering his thoughts. JK. I owe you a better explanation. Y/N about yesterday. Y/N. You don't, JK. I do. He looked up, his eyes meeting mine. When I saw you knock over that glass, My first thought was that you were nervous. I know I can be intimidating in meetings. I thought I had pushed you too hard. And when Mr. Choi made that comment, I felt responsible for creating that pressure. So my reaction came from a place of frustration with myself. It was misdirected, and it was wrong. But I need you to know it was never because I think you're insignificant. Quite the opposite. He took a sip of water, his Adam's apple bobbing. JK. You are the most competent, detail-oriented, and insightful person on my team. I rely on you more than you know. Your reports are always flawless. Your coffee is always perfect. A small, shy smile touched his lips. For the past 2 years, you've been the one constant, reliable thing in my chaotic life. And when I thought I had broken that, I was angry at myself. Tears welled in my eyes again, but this time they were tears of relief. All this time, I thought I was invisible to him, but he saw me. He really saw me. Y/N. I didn't know you felt that way, JK. I'm not very good at showing it. I'm better at barking orders and scowling at spreadsheets. He sighed. This company, it's my life. I built it to prove something to myself, to my family. Sometimes I get so lost in the fight that I forget to look at the people fighting alongside me. Our food arrived, providing a momentary distraction. As we ate, the conversation began to flow more easily. We talked about work, but then it drifted to other things. We discovered a shared love for old, classic films. He laughed, a real, unrestrained laugh, when I told him about the time I tried to bake a cake and set off the fire alarm in my entire apartment building. It was the most normal, and yet the most extraordinary hour of my life. The powerful, untouchable Jeon Jungkook was gone. In his place was just Jungkook, a man who was funny, a little awkward, and surprisingly sweet. As dessert was served, a delicate mango pudding, he grew quiet again, his expression turning serious. JK, Y/N. There's something else I need to say. My heart hammered against my ribs. What is it? He looked down at his hands, then back up at me, his gaze so open and vulnerable it stole my breath. JK, when I said, "What's mine?" on the rooftop, I wasn't just talking about an employee. The world seemed to slow down. The only sound was the gentle trickle of water from the courtyard fountain. Y/N. You, JK. No, he shook his head slowly. I know that I've had feelings for you for a long time. I kept them buried because it was unprofessional. You were my employee. It was safer to just be your boss. But yesterday, when I realized what had happened, when I saw the hurt in your eyes, all I could think was that I had to fix it. I had to protect you. Not because you work for me, but because the thought of you being hurt, of you thinking I don't value you, it felt like someone was tearing my heart out. I stared at him, completely speechless. This couldn't be real. It was everything I had ever dreamed of, and nothing I had ever expected. JK, I understand if this makes you uncomfortable. I'm still your boss, and that's a complication. And after how I behaved, I wouldn't blame you if you never wanted to see me again. But I had to tell you the truth. I found my voice, though it was barely a whisper y/n. All this time, I felt the same way. The confession hung in the air between us. Fragile and beautiful, his eyes widened, filling with a hope so bright it was almost blinding. JK. Really? Y/n. For 2 years, I admitted, feeling a massive weight lift from my soul. I thought I was just a fool with a hopeless crush on her boss. A slow, radiant smile spread across his face, erasing any last traces of the cold CEO. JK. Then it seems, he said, his voice low and warm, we've both been fools. He reached across the table, his hand open, palm up. An invitation. Hesitantly, I placed my hand in his fingers closed around mine, his grip firm and sure, his skin warm. It felt like coming home. A/n. Swoon, the confessions, the hand-holding. This is the moment we've been waiting for. The air is literally sparkling with romance. But what happens when they go back to the office? The story isn't over yet. A/n. Confessions are beautiful, but reality is waiting right outside the restaurant door. How do you navigate a new, fragile relationship when one of you is the CEO? Let's find out. He didn't let go of my hand the entire drive back to the office. He drove with one hand on the wheel, the other holding mine resting on his thigh. The simple contact sent electric currents shooting up my arm. We didn't speak much, but the silence was comfortable, filled with a new, profound understanding. When we pulled into the garage, he turned to me, his expression a mixture of hope and uncertainty. JK. So, what happens now? Y/n. I don't know, I answered honestly. The office, it's going to be complicated. JK, I know, and I would never ask you to do anything you're uncomfortable with. He took a deep breath. My feelings for you are real. Y/n, they are separate from this company. But I understand if you need time, or if you think this is a bad idea. I looked at our joined hands, then back at his face, the face of the man I had loved from afar for so long. The man who had just shown me a vulnerability I never knew he possessed. Was I really going to let complicated stand in our way? Y/n. I don't think it's a bad idea, I said softly. But maybe we take it slow. Figure it out as we go. The relief that washed over his features was palpable. JK. Slow is good. We can do slow. He smiled, that heart-stopping, genuine smile. But just so we're clear, slow doesn't mean I can't do this. He leaned across the console, his free hand coming up to cup my cheek. His eyes searched mine for a moment, asking a silent question. I gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. And then he kissed me. It wasn't a demanding or passionate kiss. It was soft, tentative, and achingly sweet. A promise, a beginning. It was over too soon, but it left me breathless and dizzy, my lips tingling. JK. Okay, he whispered, his forehead resting against mine. We can start with slow. Walking back into the office, holding his hand felt like crossing a threshold into a new world, we decided, mutually, to be discreet at work. No public displays of affection. We would remain professional during office hours, but some things were undeniably different. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. At work, he was still Mr. Jeon, and I was still his assistant. But now, his requests were always punctuated with a please and a thank you, and his eyes would often find mine across a room, holding a secret warmth that was just for me. He started asking for my opinion on major projects, truly listening to my answers. He delegated more, trusting me with bigger responsibilities. I was no longer just the assistant who got his coffee. I was his partner in the boardroom, and he made sure everyone knew it after work, though, was our time. He would wait for me in his car after everyone had left, and we would go to quiet, hidden away places. We went for long walks along the Han River, his hand finding mine in the darkness. We went to cozy, unknown cafes where he could just be Jungkook, a man who loved iced Americanos and making me laugh. I met his friends properly, Jin, Jimin, and the others not as my boss's friends, but as his friends. They welcomed me with open arms, Jin giving me a knowing wink, Jimin pulling me into a warm hug and whispering, "It's about time. He's been miserable and pining for years." One evening, we were at his penthouse apartment, curled up on his huge sofa, watching a movie. My head was on his chest, and I could feel the steady thump of his heartbeat under my ear. His fingers were gently tracing patterns on my arm Y/N. "You know," I said, tilting my head back to look at him. "For 2 years, I was so intimidated by you, the cold boss Jeon." He chuckled, the sound rumbling in his chest, JK. "And now, Y/N. Now I know the truth. You're not cold at all. You're just a softie who's bad at showing his feelings." He pretended to be offended, pinching my side gently, making me squeal, JK. "I am not a softie. I am a fearsome business titan. Y/N. "Of course you are," I said, patting his chest condescendingly. "That's why you have a collection of tiny RJ plushies that Jin Hyung buys for you." He blushed, a deep pink creeping up his neck. It was the most adorable thing I had ever seen, JK. They're for good luck." I laughed, snuggling closer to him. I felt his arms tighten around me, holding me close, JK. "You know," he said, his voice suddenly serious and soft, "that day on the rooftop was the worst and best day of my life." Y/N. "How so, JK?" "It was the worst because I hurt you, and I will never forgive myself for that. But it was the best because it was the push I needed to finally open my eyes, to see what was right in front of me all along." He shifted, tilting my chin up, so I was looking into his deep, earnest eyes. "JK, I love you. Y/N. I think I have for a very long time." Tears of pure joy filled my eyes. No confession had ever sounded more perfect. Y/N. "I love you too, Jungkook." He kissed me then, a kiss that was no longer a tentative promise, but a confident, deep affirmation of everything we felt. It was filled with 2 years of pent-up longing, with gratitude for second chances, and with a hope for a future that was brighter than we had ever imagined the cold boss had thawed. And in his place, I found the warm, loving, and fiercely protective man of my dreams. Our beginning had been messy and full of misunderstandings, but our story was going to be a beautiful 1A/N. And there we have it. From a painful misunderstanding to a sweet and heartfelt confession. I hope you loved this journey of Y/N and Jungkook as much as I loved writing it. Remember, the best love stories often start with a little chaos. Never be afraid to speak your truth